Comfort hides behind policy. On the surface, policy looks neutral. It looks clean. It's written in careful language, formatted in bullet points, approved by committees. It gives the impression of order. Everyone knows what to do. Everyone knows what not to do. There's comfort in that structure. There's relief in being able to point to a paragraph and say, I followed the rules. But comfort has a way of settling in too deeply. When policy becomes the main shield people rely on, it slowly shifts from guidance to protection. Not protection from chaos or risk, but protection from responsibility. Instead of asking, is this the best decision? People start asking, is this allowed? Instead of pushing for excellence, they push for compliance. The goal shrinks from doing what's right to doing what's required. And that's where the danger hides. Policy is meant to set a baseline. It defines the minimum standard. It tells you the floor, not the ceiling. But over time, in comfortable environments, the floor starts to feel like the goal. Hitting the minimum becomes enough. Checking the box becomes success. As long as no rule is technically broken, no one feels exposed. It creates a quiet agreement. I won't question you if you don't question me. We'll all stay inside the lines. We'll all point to the handbook when things go wrong. Comfort thrives in that agreement. You see it in small ways. Meetings where obvious problems are discussed cautiously, always in reference to process. Performance reviews that focus more on documentation than impact. Decisions delayed because someone is waiting for formal approval, even when the right move is clear. The policy becomes the safe answer. It's easier to cite it than to think beyond it. The more complex the policy, the easier it is to hide inside it. Lengthy procedures make people feel secure. If there are enough steps, enough forms, enough checkpoints, it feels thorough. It feels responsible. But complexity can mask weakness. It can create the illusion of control while real problems grow underneath. People begin to trust the structure more than their own judgment. And judgment is what real leadership demands. When someone challenges the status quo, the first defense is often, that's not how we do it. Not because the alternative is wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. Because it removes the cushion of written protection. If you act outside the script, you can't blame the script. You own the outcome. That's uncomfortable. So people lean harder on policy. They quote it. They enforce it strictly. They treat it as sacred, even when circumstances clearly call for flexibility. It becomes less about purpose and more about preservation. Preserve the system. Preserve the routine. Preserve the sense that nothing unpredictable will happen. But the real world is unpredictable. Policy can't anticipate every variable. It can't adapt in real time. It can't replace critical thinking under pressure. When people are trained to depend on rules instead of readiness, they become fragile. They may look organized, but they're not prepared. They may look compliant, but they're not capable beyond the script. Comfort tells them that's fine, as long as they're protected. Protected from blame. Protected from risk. Protected from standing out. What gets lost is ownership. When policy is used as a shield, accountability weakens. If something fails, the answer is, we followed procedure. It shifts responsibility upward or outward. The document becomes the authority, not the person making the decision. It creates distance between action and consequence. Over time, initiative shrinks. Creativity fades. Urgency slows down. People stop asking how to improve the system and start focusing on surviving within it. The energy that could have gone into growth is redirected into maintenance. Maintain the process. Maintain the appearance of order. Comfort loves maintenance. It feels safe. It feels steady. It avoids conflict. But it also avoids progress. The irony is that policy was created to support performance, not replace it. It was meant to provide clarity, not comfort. It was designed to guide behavior, not excuse mediocrity. When used correctly, it strengthens standards. When used as a hiding place, it weakens them. The moment someone raises the bar beyond what's written, discomfort spreads. Because now the comparison isn't between you and the policy. It's between you and your potential. And that's harder to defend with a paragraph from a handbook. Comfort can survive inside a rulebook for years. It can build entire cultures around compliance. It can convince intelligent, capable people that doing enough is doing well. And as long as no one challenges that belief, the illusion holds. Standards expose excuses. Excuses survive in the shadows. They grow in environments where expectations are vague, where performance is negotiable, where good enough is never clearly defined. When standards are low or loosely enforced, almost any result can be justified. There's always a reason. Not enough time. Not enough support. Not the right conditions. Not my responsibility. But the moment a clear, uncompromising standard enters the room, the excuses start to shrink. A real standard is specific. It's measurable. It doesn't shift depending on mood or convenience. It says, this is the level. Not close to it. Not most of the way there. This is it. And when that line is drawn clearly, performance becomes visible. So does the gap. That gap is uncomfortable. Without standards, people can blend in. Average looks acceptable when there's nothing better to compare it to. Effort can be mistaken for excellence. Activity can be mistaken for achievement. If everyone is operating at roughly the same level, no one feels exposed. Introduce a higher standard, and suddenly the differences show. The person who was once considered reliable may now look inconsistent. The team that believed they were efficient may realize they were simply familiar with routine. What used to pass without question now gets measured against something sharper. Excuses begin to sound thinner. When the expectation is clear, I didn't know doesn't work. When the target is defined, I tried my best isn't enough. Standards don't respond to emotion. They respond to results. They don't care how busy you felt. They care whether the outcome met the mark. That's why standards feel threatening to some people. They remove hiding places. They eliminate ambiguity. They force ownership. If the standard is known and you fall short, the reason isn't confusion. It's preparation, discipline, or execution. It's something within your influence. It's easier to blame circumstances than to confront that. In low-standard environments, effort is often praised loudly because outcomes are modest. Showing up on time becomes impressive. Completing basic tasks becomes worthy of recognition. The bar is low enough that almost everyone clears it, so no one feels pressure to grow. But raise the bar, and effort alone stops being enough. Now skill matters. Preparation matters. Attention to detail matters. The margin for error narrows. You can't rely on personality or good intentions to compensate for weak performance. The work either meets the standard or it doesn't. That clarity changes conversations. Instead of debating opinions, people look at metrics. Instead of defending feelings, they review facts. Standards shift the focus from who you are to what you produced. They make performance objective. They strip away the protective layer of subjectivity that excuses often hide behind. This doesn't mean standards are cruel. It means they're honest. High standards create pressure, but they also create growth. When people know exactly what's expected, they can train for it. They can prepare deliberately. They can measure progress. The standard becomes a target, not a threat. The problem arises when people are attached to their current level of performance. If someone has built their identity around being one of the best in a low-standard setting, a higher bar feels like an attack. It exposes how much more is possible. It reveals that past praise may have been inflated. It challenges comfort. Excuses rush in to defend that comfort. The standard is unrealistic. We don't have the resources. That's not how we've done it before. It's too much to expect. Sometimes those statements contain truth, but often they are reflexes, not analysis. They are protective reactions to being measured more precisely than before. A strong standard forces a choice. Adapt or rationalize. Improve or explain. Train harder or talk longer. Over time, something interesting happens. The people who lean into the standard get stronger. Their skills sharpen. Their confidence becomes grounded in evidence, not reassurance. They stop fearing measurement because they know they've prepared for it. Meanwhile, the excuses become repetitive. They sound the same in every setting. The details change, but the pattern stays constant. External blame. Defensive language. Emphasis on obstacles instead of solutions. Standards don't argue with excuses. They outlast them. When the expectation remains steady and non-negotiable, the only sustainable response is growth. People either rise to meet it or they remove themselves from it. The environment shifts. Conversations become more direct. Feedback becomes clearer. Accountability becomes normal. In that kind of culture, excuses lose their power because they don't change the outcome. They don't lower the bar. They don't adjust the measurement. The work still has to be done at the required level. And when that becomes the norm, performance stops being about avoiding blame and starts being about pursuing excellence. Discipline rewrites weak systems. Weak systems don't always look broken. On paper, they can appear organized and functional. There are workflows, reporting structures, schedules, and guidelines. From the outside, everything seems stable, but weakness reveals itself under pressure. Deadlines slip. Small mistakes multiply. Responsibility becomes blurry. The system depends too much on mood, personality, or luck. That's where discipline changes everything. Discipline is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with speeches or slogans. It shows up in habits. It shows up in preparation long before performance is required. It shows up in the quiet decision to do what needs to be done even when no one is watching. In a weak system, discipline stands out immediately. When most people cut corners, the one who doesn't exposes the gap. When deadlines are treated as flexible, the person who meets them consistently shifts expectations. When preparation is minimal, the person who overprepares raises the standard without saying a word. Weak systems rely on tolerance. They tolerate lateness. They tolerate half-finished work. They tolerate vague communication. Over time, that tolerance becomes culture. It sends a message that precision is optional, that excellence is nice, but not necessary. Discipline refuses that message. A disciplined person doesn't wait for the system to improve before improving themselves. They don't adjust their effort to match the lowest common denominator. They bring structure where there was none. They document clearly. They communicate directly. They follow through completely. At first, this can create friction. In a weak system, consistency can feel disruptive. When one person tracks metrics carefully, others can't hide behind generalities. When someone insists on clarity, vague language gets challenged. When preparation becomes visible, excuses become harder to justify. The system starts to feel the pressure. Discipline highlights inefficiencies. It reveals unnecessary steps. It exposes where accountability is missing, not through criticism, but through contrast. When disciplined action produces better results, it becomes harder to defend the old way. Weak systems often survive because no one models a better alternative long enough to prove it works. Discipline provides that proof. It rewrites expectations through repetition. When high-quality work shows up every time, people adjust what they consider normal. What once seemed exceptional becomes the new baseline. The system begins to reorganize around reliability instead of randomness. This doesn't happen instantly. Weak systems resist change because they are comfortable. They protect patterns that require less effort. They reward conformity over improvement. But discipline is persistent. It doesn't fluctuate with approval or criticism. Over time, others are forced to respond. Some will rise to match it. They'll see the benefits of structure and adopt similar habits. They'll experience the clarity that comes from consistent preparation. They'll notice that stress decreases when details are handled early instead of rushed at the last minute. Others may withdraw. Discipline removes the safety of blending in. It makes performance visible. It separates intention from execution. A weak system thrives on ambiguity. Discipline eliminates ambiguity. Clear deadlines, clear standards, clear communication, clear ownership. When those elements become consistent, confusion decreases. Decision-making improves. Energy stops leaking into avoidable mistakes. Discipline also strengthens resilience. In fragile systems, unexpected challenges cause panic. There's no foundation of preparation to absorb the shock. In disciplined environments, the groundwork is already laid. People have trained. They've anticipated obstacles. They've built habits that hold under stress. The system becomes stronger not because a new rule was written, but because behavior changed. That's the key difference. Weak systems try to solve problems by adding policies. Discipline solves problems by raising personal standards. It focuses on execution rather than explanation. It values consistency over convenience. When enough individuals operate with discipline, the culture shifts. Meetings start on time because lateness stands out. Deliverables improve because mediocrity is visible. Communication sharpens because sloppy thinking is challenged by precise thinking. Their right happens gradually. No announcement declares that the system has changed. No memo states that weakness is no longer acceptable. The shift is visible in outcomes. Projects finish cleaner. Errors decrease. Accountability becomes normal instead of forced. Discipline doesn't attack the system directly. It outperforms it. And when consistent performance exposes how much better things can be, even entrenched habits begin to loosen. The old excuses sound tired. The old shortcuts look risky. The gap between what was tolerated and what is now possible becomes too obvious to ignore. Weak systems depend on the idea that this is just how things are. Discipline proves that things can be different. Leadership isn't rank, it's responsibility. Rank is visible. It comes with a title, a position on the org chart, maybe a larger office or a different uniform. People recognize it immediately. They know who reports to whom. They know who signs off on decisions. Rank creates structure, and structure has value. But leadership is not guaranteed by structure. You can hold the highest title in the room and still avoid responsibility. You can have authority over budgets, schedules, and people, yet hesitate when real accountability is required. Rank gives you power over processes. Leadership demands ownership of outcomes. That difference shows up under pressure. When something goes wrong, rank asks, who made this mistake? Leadership asks, where did I fail to set the standard? Rank looks for the person closest to the error. Leadership looks at the system it allowed to exist. Rank protects position. Leadership protects the mission. Responsibility is heavier than authority. Authority allows you to delegate tasks. Responsibility requires you to own results, even when you weren't directly involved. A true leader doesn't distance themselves from failure. They step toward it. They absorb the impact so their team can focus on correction instead of fear. That posture builds trust. People don't follow titles for long. They comply with them. Compliance is fragile. It lasts only as long as oversight is present. Trust is different. Trust grows when people see someone consistently take responsibility, especially when it's uncomfortable. Leadership is visible in small moments long before major crises. It's in the meeting where credit is redirected to the team instead of claimed at the top. It's in the private conversation where tough feedback is delivered clearly but respectfully. It's in the decision to address a problem early instead of ignoring it because it's inconvenient. Rank can command attention. Responsibility earns respect. There are environments where rank is emphasized heavily. Titles are repeated. Hierarchies are rigid. Decisions move slowly because they must pass through layers of approval. In those environments, people sometimes mistake compliance for leadership. They assume that giving instructions equals leading. But instruction without ownership creates distance. If a leader only appears when it's time to evaluate or correct, their presence feels transactional. Leadership rooted in responsibility shows up before evaluation. It shows up in preparation, in clarity, in making sure expectations are understood and resources are aligned. Responsibility also means making decisions when information is incomplete. Rank can hide behind committees and endless review. Leadership recognizes that waiting too long can be more damaging than making a calculated call. Taking responsibility means accepting that not every decision will be perfect, but indecision carries its own cost. It also means protecting standards. A leader focused on rank may prioritize popularity. They may avoid hard conversations to maintain approval. Responsibility demands something different. It requires upholding expectations even when it creates tension. It requires consistency, not favoritism. When people see standards applied evenly, credibility strengthens. Leadership is often tested most when recognition is absent. It's easy to take responsibility when success is visible and praise follows. It's harder when the work is behind the scenes, when the correction goes unnoticed, when the sacrifice is quiet. Responsibility continues regardless of visibility. It doesn't depend on applause. Rank can be assigned overnight. Responsibility is proven over time. Teams quickly sense the difference. They notice who stays late to solve a shared problem. They notice who answers difficult questions directly instead of deflecting. They notice who shields them from unnecessary pressure and who passes it downward. Responsibility creates alignment. When a leader owns the outcome, the team understands the mission matters more than ego. Blame decreases because energy is redirected toward solutions. People feel safer speaking up about risks or mistakes because they know the goal is improvement, not punishment. Leadership without responsibility breeds caution and silence. People learn to protect themselves instead of pushing forward. They focus on avoiding fault rather than pursuing excellence. Innovation slows because risk feels dangerous in a blame-driven environment. Responsibility changes that dynamic. It signals that mistakes will be addressed, but not weaponized. It reinforces that performance matters, but growth is possible. It clarifies that accountability starts at the top and flows downward, not the other way around. Over time, rank becomes secondary. What people remember is who stood up when things were uncertain, who made the hard call, who admitted error, who stayed steady when others hesitated. Leadership isn't secured by the badge on your chest or the line under your name. It's demonstrated every time you choose to carry the weight instead of shifting it. Accountability feels like a threat to the comfortable. Comfort builds routines. It builds predictable patterns where expectations are familiar and consequences are mild. In comfortable environments, people know how far they can go without being challenged. They understand the unspoken limits. They know what will be overlooked. Accountability disrupts that balance. The moment clear measurement enters the room, comfort tightens. When results are tracked openly, when standards are enforced consistently, when feedback is direct instead of softened, people who relied on vagueness begin to feel exposed. It's not that accountability is unfair. It's that it removes insulation. In low accountability cultures, effort can substitute for effectiveness. Saying you worked hard can compensate for not delivering results. Being busy can distract from being productive. There's room to explain, to reframe, to shift attention elsewhere. Accountability narrows that space. It asks simple questions. What was the goal? What was delivered? If there's a gap, why? Those questions sound straightforward, but they carry weight. They focus attention on outcomes, not intentions. They force clarity where there was once flexibility. For someone comfortable in ambiguity, that feels threatening. It challenges identity. If a person has grown used to being seen as reliable without being measured closely, accountability tests that perception. It moves the evaluation from reputation to reality. That shift can feel personal, even when it's procedural. Comfort often depends on comparison to a weak baseline. If everyone around you is performing at a similar level, there's safety in the group. No one stands out for underperforming because underperformance is normalized. Accountability raises the baseline. It defines what acceptable truly means. Suddenly, the comparison changes. Now the question isn't whether you're doing as well as others. It's whether you're meeting the standard. That distinction creates pressure. Pressure reveals habits. It shows who prepared consistently and who relied on last-minute effort. It exposes who tracked details and who assumed things would work out. Accountability doesn't create weakness, but it does uncover it. That's why resistance often appears first as defensiveness. People may argue that the metrics are unfair. They may claim the expectations are unrealistic. They may point to external factors. Sometimes those concerns are valid, but often they are shields against scrutiny. Comfort resists scrutiny because scrutiny demands growth. Accountability also removes favoritism. In comfortable systems, informal relationships can protect performance. A friendly personality can soften evaluation. A long history can excuse declining results. Clear accountability limits those advantages. It treats performance as measurable, not negotiable. That can feel cold to those who benefited from flexibility. But fairness and comfort are not the same thing. Fairness requires consistency. It requires that standards apply evenly. When accountability is applied uniformly, it creates stability. People know where they stand. They understand what is expected. There's less guessing, less politics. Still, the transition from comfort to accountability can feel abrupt. People who have never been measured clearly may experience it as criticism rather than clarity. They may interpret direct feedback as personal rejection instead of professional guidance. The discomfort is real because the cushion is gone. What replaces it is responsibility. Accountability shifts the focus from defending past performance to improving future results. It reframes conversations. Instead of asking, "Why are you targeting me?" the more productive question becomes, "What do I need to adjust?" That shift requires humility. Comfort doesn't demand humility. It allows people to operate without deep self-examination. Accountability invites reflection. It encourages people to evaluate their habits, their preparation, their follow-through. It also builds resilience. When individuals get used to being measured honestly, they stop fearing evaluation. Feedback becomes information rather than threat. Gaps become training targets instead of hidden weaknesses. Over time, confidence grows from competence, not avoidance. But before that growth, there is discomfort. Comfortable environments often interpret accountability as aggression because it changes the emotional climate. Conversations become more direct. Expectations become clearer. Consequences become real. For those attached to the old way, it can feel like something is being taken away. What's actually being removed is illusion. The illusion that effort automatically equals impact. The illusion that good intentions compensate for weak execution. The illusion that staying busy guarantees progress. Accountability replaces illusion with evidence. It reveals where improvement is needed. It highlights strengths accurately. It separates narrative from numbers. And while that clarity can feel sharp at first, it creates a foundation that comfort alone never could. The tension between comfort and accountability is not about cruelty versus kindness. It's about whether growth is optional or required. Real protection comes from competence, not compliance. Compliance feels safe. It provides clear instructions and defined boundaries. If you follow the steps, complete the forms, and stay within the outline limits, you can say you did what was required. There's reassurance in that structure. It tells you that as long as you don't break the rules, you're protected. But compliance only guarantees alignment with procedure. It doesn't guarantee capability. A person can follow every rule and still be unprepared for reality. They can complete every mandatory training and still hesitate under pressure. They can meet every formal requirement and still lack the skill to adapt when conditions change. Competence is different. Competence is built through repetition, correction, and deliberate practice. It's not about knowing the policy. It's about mastering the task. It's the ability to perform consistently, even when variables shift. It shows up when the script no longer applies. Compliance depends on predictability. Competence thrives despite unpredictability. In stable environments, the difference can be hard to see. If challenges are routine and risk is low, following established guidelines may seem sufficient. The system runs smoothly. Problems are manageable. No one feels the gap. But when pressure increases, the gap becomes visible. An unexpected crisis doesn't pause to check whether you followed procedure. It tests whether you understand fundamentals. It exposes whether you've internalized principles or simply memorized steps. In that moment, compliance offers little comfort. Competence carries you through. It allows you to make decisions without waiting for instruction. It enables you to adjust without panic. It gives you the confidence to act because you've built the skill, not just reviewed the manual. Compliance can create a false sense of security. If someone believes that adhering strictly to rules is enough, they may stop developing beyond that. They may assume that the system will compensate for their weaknesses. Over time, their growth plateaus. They become efficient at checking boxes, but not at solving complex problems. Competence requires ongoing effort. It demands honest assessment. It forces you to confront where you're average and where you're weak. It pushes you to refine details that others overlook. It asks more than the minimum. That extra effort is what builds real protection. When you are competent, you don't rely solely on the structure around you. You become an asset to it. Your skill strengthens the system instead of hiding inside it. If the framework shifts, you adapt. If guidance is unclear, you think critically. Compliance without competence is fragile. It works only as long as circumstances match expectations. The moment conditions change, uncertainty rises. People look around for new instructions. They wait. They hesitate. The absence of clear direction creates stress because their protection was external. Competence makes protection internal. It turns preparation into confidence. It reduces hesitation because understanding replaces guesswork. It doesn't eliminate risk, but it improves response. You may not control the environment, but you control your readiness. Organizations often emphasize compliance because it's measurable. You can track whether someone completed a course. You can confirm whether a form was submitted. You can audit whether a procedure was followed. Competence is harder to quantify. It shows itself in performance, especially under strain. But the difficulty of measurement doesn't reduce its importance. A team that values competence trains differently. They practice beyond the checklist. They simulate challenges. They seek feedback before it's required. They aim to master the skill, not just satisfy the requirement. Individuals who pursue competence ask different questions. Instead of "what do I have to do?" they ask, "what should I be able to handle?" Instead of stopping at adequacy, they push toward proficiency. They recognize that rules can guide behavior, but they cannot replace ability. Real protection is revealed in critical moments. When a plan falls apart, competence rebuilds it quickly. When communication breaks down, competence clarifies it. When resources shrink, competence prioritizes effectively. It allows you to operate with clarity instead of fear. Compliance may protect you from punishment. Competence protects you from failure. That distinction matters when the stakes rise. Rules can prevent obvious mistakes. They can create boundaries that reduce chaos. But they cannot anticipate every scenario. They cannot replace judgment. They cannot compensate for lack of skill. Competence fills that space. It transforms knowledge into action. It turns preparation into performance. It shifts protection from something written on paper to something embedded in behavior. And when the unexpected happens, it is not the rulebook that carries you forward, but the ability you have built long before the moment arrived.